Manchester United, completely different scene at this club, isn't it, Dharmesh? Jadon Sancho looking for a way out. Will he?
I mean, if everyone has their way, I think Jadon Sancho won't be a Manchester United player come the start of next season. And the team that are really pushing at the moment are Juventus. Now, talks over a potential move from Manchester United to Juventus for Jadon Sancho have been described to me as positive at this stage. However, there is still work to do to find an agreement between clubs, between Juventus and Manchester United, and possibly more significantly between the Jadon Sancho himself and his representatives and Juventus because of the personal term situation. Now, Juventus are pushing, and there appears to be a willingness from all parties to strike a deal over Jadon Sancho. As far as Juventus are concerned, they are definitely in the market for a winger. That's because they've so far failed to find an agreement with Francisco Conceição. He's a player that joined on a straight loan for the season from Porto last summer. He actually extended that stay for a little while so he could play in the Club World Cup. He started against Real Madrid last night. However, Juventus and Porto, while they've been negotiating on a fee, there's a big gap in valuation. Hence why Juventus have probably turned their attentions for now onto Jadon Sancho.
Right.
Sancho himself is understood to be open to the move after failing to agree terms. We go back to those personal terms again with Chelsea, because remember, Chelsea had an obligation to buy Jadon Sancho after his loan spell, but they wanted to renegotiate his contract. Basically, he was getting paid what they didn't want to pay at Manchester United. But as a result of them not taking up the obligation, they were forced to pay a £5 million penalty to Manchester United. We think the asking price is around £25 million, which is what they were willing to sell him to Chelsea for, and what Juventus would probably have to pay if they wanted to bring him in. However, given Sancho's wages, I don't think you can fully rule out another loan move. And then Manchester United will have to have some sort of agreement whereby they might have to pay a portion of the wages. Now, sometimes people will say that's not great for Manchester United because it's a player that they own, and yet they're paying somebody else part of the wages to get him off their books and to play for another club. However, there are clever ways that you can still make money, and Manchester United and Jadon Sancho is a prime example, because in his first loan spell from the club, when he went to Borussia Dortmund, United actually made money on his wages. Because at the start of that deal, Manchester United were paying a portion of the wages, but it went up the amount that Borussia Dortmund would have to pay depending on his performance and what Borussia Dortmund did for the rest of that season.
Right.
He played well. Borussia Dortmund got to the Champions League final, and it got to the point where Dortmund actually paid more than United would have had to have paid had Sancho stayed at the club.
OK. It just feels like another loan move is just delaying the inevitable. But, Mark...
Well, just to interrupt you there, yeah. It's got to come to a head sooner rather than later.
Exactly.
He's got a year left on his contract, albeit United do have an option for a further year.
OK. And Mark, there's still quite a few players at Manchester United whose futures are up in the air. When do we get clarity on these things?
Well, if someone picks up the phone to Manchester United today, they're going to get quoted one price. If those players are still in the Manchester United building in 6 weeks' time, the price will change. Now, there's potentially, 4 players that could be departing, certainly, in the ones we've been speaking about. Dharmesh has mentioned Jadon Sancho. The other players there, obviously Marcus Rashford, who has 3 years left on his current contract. Another one of those big hitters who's on big money as well.
Big wages.
Big wages, which will be a stumbling block for a number of sides. Antony's the other one who had that successful loan spell at Real Betis, but he still has a couple of years left on his Old Trafford deal. And Alejandro Garnacho as well. So I'd imagine out of those 4, 3 of them probably will depart Manchester United this summer.
You're going to put your money on who?
Well, I think Garnacho's probably the one that would be likely to stay if any of them would stay.
Right.
However, he would represent the best PSR profit alongside Marcus Rashford because of his time at the football club and what he cost them. We know that there were heavy investments in Jadon Sancho and Antony, so therefore the book price on those players will change, and we know that PSR is such a big factor in what clubs do and how they do business at the moment. But again, you need someone to come to the table. You need someone to pick up the phone to Manchester United and say, right, we want Marcus Rashford, we're prepared to pay you this, and we're prepared to give him this chunk of the wages that he's currently on.
And that hasn't happened yet. A player of his quality.
Well, I think Marcus Rashford, is so talented. He's an exceptional player, and you saw in moments at Aston Villa last season that he could still do it at the highest level. He said publicly he's got a desire to play in the Champions League. The likelihood of him playing for those sides in the Premier League and the Champions League, Man City, no. Liverpool, no. Newcastle, probably not. So therefore, he's going to have to go into Europe. We know that he is on a list at Barcelona. However, Nico Williams is on that list. Luis Diaz is on that list. And Barcelona have real struggles when it comes to their finances to not only sign players, but register them. I could imagine Marcus Rashford going on loan at some stage later on in the window with Manchester United having to pay a chunk of his wages, maybe getting a Jadon Sancho performance-type deal on the table. However, Manchester United go back to pre-season on the 7th of July, on Monday. Does Marcus Rashford really want to go back into that building? Does Jadon Sancho really want to go back into that building with everything that's happened over the course of the last 6, 12, 18 months?
And does Amorim want them there, disrupting things?
If they might come in with a clean slate and say, no, I'm here to crack on and play. Yeah. I'm a top quality professional and I just want to get fit.
I think the ideal scenario here for Manchester United is those 4 players leave and they all leave on a permanent deal.
Yep.
For 2 reasons. They're clearly not part of the plans under Ruben Amorim, but also the finances that they would bring in, I would guess, just as an estimate, you would be able to glean about 125 to 150 million pounds if you were to sell all 4 of those players in this summer's transfer window. And the reason it's so important for the second reason is because
Manchester United have reportedly added Aston Villa striker Ollie Watkins to their shortlist in case they generate the budget to upgrade Ruben Amorim's attack further. The Red Devils are said to have held exploratory talks with Villa to understand the conditions of a potential deal, but they must sell players before making any formal move. Incoming Manchester United fullback Diego Leon wants to stake his claim for a spot in Ruben Amorim's first-team squad during the club's pre-season. United completed a pre-contract deal for the 18-year-old from Paraguayan side Cerro Porteño in the winter window, and an official club announcement of his arrival could come this week.